A very good morning to you and welcome to the Business Lens on Rapid Television, Abuja. It is great to have you with us on this edition. Business Lens is where we look at how all the numbers and figures directly affect you and your businesses. My name is Divine Alex. So let's begin with the key business trends that matter right now, starting from the headlines. Nigeria's borrowing appetite continues to rise as fresh CBN data shows credit to the federal government climbed to 40.38 trillion naira in May 2026, which is up from 22.99 trillion naira year earlier, which is a 75.6% increase within 1 year. While government financing needs to continue growing, private sector credit has expanded at a much slower pace, raising concerns around whether businesses and households are getting enough access to funds needed to drive production, investment, and economic growth. And to the next, where we have Nigeria's digital credit market that is entering a new phase as the FCCPC moves 48 loan apps companies from conditional approval to full approval, bringing the number of fully approved digital lenders in the country to 505. The move is aimed at strengthening regulation in a sector that has grown rapidly by providing quick access to credit, but it also raises bigger questions around responsible lending, borrower protection, and whether increased numbers of lenders will translate into better and more affordable credit access for Nigerians. And to the next, we have the story of Nigeria's cybersecurity agency, NGSART, has warned financial institutions about a growing wave of coordinated ATM cash-out attacks after cybercriminals reportedly accessed banking infrastructure linked to a UBA Senegal incident, leading to more than $2 million in fraudulent withdrawals through 3,421 transactions. Now, this warning highlights how cyber threats are evolving from individual fraud attempts into sophisticated attacks targeting payment system. This raises questions about whether banks and financial institutions are keeping pace with the risks that come with rapid digital finance expansion. Now to the next, where I say beyond financial systems, we have Africa's Mission 300 electricity program that has secured about $1.4 billion in co-financing from international development partners as the continent pushes toward connecting 300 million people to electricity by 2030, with institutions including the European Investment Bank, African Development Bank, and Green Climate Fund contributing to the program. This initiative represents a major investment push, but the bigger challenge remains whether funding can translate into reliable power access, stronger electricity systems, and sustainable energy markets across Africa. Now to the next, where Nigeria has drawn the first $1.5 billion from a $5 billion total return swap financing agreement with First Abu Dhabi Bank as the federal government moves to refinance debts and support budget financing. But the structure has raised questions again around foreign exchange risk, collateral obligations, and monetary policy flexibility. Now, away from that, we head to the next one that says Nigeria exported 105.5 billion naira worth of petrol to Togo in Q1 2026, marking a major shift in the country's downstream petroleum trade as domestic refining capacity expands. The data from the NBS Foreign Trade Statistics report shows petrol became one of Nigeria's key exports to Togo. Now to the next. Nigeria has approved fresh petrol and diesel imports for Q3 2026, which is from July to September, as regulators move to prevent possible supply disruptions despite growing domestic refining capacity. And according to reports, the approval were granted to major downstream operators amid concerns over declining fuel stock levels and reduced gasoline output from the Dangote Petroleum Refinery. Now let's head straight into the markets. Nigeria's equities market has entered a period of adjustment as the NGX All-Share Index fell below 50% year-to-date return mark for the first time in 2026, closing at 49.12%. The market declined 0.66% in one section, wiping out 982.96 billion naira in investor wealth and bringing market capitalization down to 148.91 trillion naira. The sell-off led by pressure on major stocks, including banking names, raising questions about whether investors are simply taking profits after a strong run or whether expectations around Nigeria's economic outlook are beginning to shift. Now, we will look at the stories and more and a conversation on Nigeria's oil and gas industry with an oil and gas expert. My name is Divine Alex. Stay with us. You're welcome back. This is still the Business Lens of Rapid Television, Abuja. My name is Divine Alex. Now, for decades, Nigeria has been trapped in one of the biggest contradictions in the global energy market. Africa's largest crude oil producer, but one of the world's major importers of refined petroleum products. That reality is beginning to change. Nigeria's crude oil production improved in May 2026, with the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission reporting average crude output of 1.53 million barrels per day, exceeding Nigeria's OPEC quota of 1.5 million barrels per day. When condensates are added, total output reached about 1.7 million barrels per day, Nigeria's highest in 15 months. At the same time, the downstream sector is experiencing a major transition. Nigeria exported petrol worth 105.5 billion naira in Togo in Q1 2026, showing a shift from a country dependent on imported fuel to a country capable of supplying regional markets. But the story is not straightforward. Now, despite increasing refining capacity, Nigeria has continued to approve petrol imports to protect supply stability. Reports indicate permits were issued for additional petrol imports as regulators moved to prevent shortages. So the question is, has Nigeria solved its refining problem, or are we still dealing with deeper issues around crude availability, refinery operations, pricing, logistics, and energy market structure? And beyond Nigeria, global oil markets remain sensitive to geopolitics. Any escalation involving major producers like Iran affects crude prices, shipping routes, insurance costs, and ultimately fuel prices in countries like Nigeria. And joining me today to have this conversation in the studio is an oil and gas expert, Olabode Showumi. Good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you here. Now, I want us to look at the whole conversation around Nigeria's oil and gas industries, particularly as regards to the fact that we exported and we are also approving a lot of imports, petrol imports. Now, what do you think this signals? What does this really mean?
Well, nothing. Because all the countries in the world, whether it's US, I'm talking about the big players now.
Okay.
The US, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, UAE, they both import and they export. In fact, people may not know at the moment, the US produces 13 times what we produce per day. Followed by, the US is the biggest producer now, followed by Saudi Arabia, Russia, and all that. They do most of the world's exports, but they still have some amount of imports that takes place. So the problem is not import or export. The problem is balance of trade. In simple terms, and of course, that there is a value along the supply chain. So what has happened in the past is that even though we produced a lot of crude, the processing of the crude, which is where the refinery comes in, which is where the midstream pipelines comes in, does not take place here. As a result, the jobs and the value that can come from that processing, we're losing. Now, the Dangote refinery has come in. It has produced some jobs. It's going to produce some expertise. Other refineries are expected in a couple of years. So for all those people, they are going to bring in value. Now, what has happened is that we have what we call suppressed demand. In other words, if we were to meet our full demand today, we will see that some people will start using new generators, some people will buy new cars because there will be full businesses and all that. So as the demand is met, there's an increase in demand. So Dangote refinery, as great as it is not able to fully meet the demand. So if it does not meet demand fully, it's basic economics, supply and demand, which means that there will be greater demand than supply, which means that the price will go up. So to augment that and to ensure that there is some kind of comfort for the man on the street, they now have to go to the process of importing. So that's why you have the fact that we are producing and we're still importing.
Now, Nigeria is now exporting petrol to Togo while still approving petrol imports, even though you said it's nothing because we have to do import and export at the same time. So from your perspective as an oil and gas industry expert, what exactly explains the contradictions? Is it about refining capacity, crude supply, logistics, or it is just maybe the market structure?
It's the market structure of the Dangote refinery. Don't forget, it's a private business.
Okay.
And they are in a free trade zone. They are not obligated to sell to Nigerians. I mean, they should, and we hope they do, and we hope will become our focus, but they are not obligated. So if the company, maybe because they need to pay some debt or for whatever shareholder interest decides that what is in their shareholders' interest in the immediate is to sell to Togo, then they will sell.
Mm-hmm. So now, if we are to look at Nigeria having a refinery, does having a refinery automatically mean that Nigeria no longer needs imports?
Having a refinery that meets our need.
Emphasis on that.
Yes, because you must meet the need. So if you have a refinery and it cannot meet your need, okay, so you say somebody lives in Dede or Guarimpa or somewhere, and you say that does having a car mean you will not need to take a taxi again, to the extent that the car is available and will get to the destination every time you need it. But if the car goes to the mechanic, you still need to take a taxi. If the car, there are factors that meet it. So the refinery, yes, if you have a refinery or group of refineries that meet our need, fantastic. But the need is not going to go away. So if the refinery does not meet the need, you have to find a solution to it.
Now, what percentage of Nigeria's actual petrol demand do you think local refining can actually meet if we start looking at our local refineries so that we could get to the point where we, maximize whatever it is?
When you say can meet, yeah, it can meet everything. It can meet our needs 100%. You get, but at this time, they are not able to. So in the future, I believe they will.
In the future?
Yes. I believe they will.
Okay. Now, are import licenses now about supply security or competition in the downstream sector? What is it about?
I think it's both. It's both energy security. So energy security has 3 prongs: affordability, availability, and a pool, and all that. So the fact that there is going to start, or there seems to be semblance of a queue going on, meaning there isn't availability. That's a key component of energy security. The people responsible for that, managing that, will be the regulator. So on them, they have to use their wisdom, the powers available to them, the regulatory enforcement, to ensure that that gap is met, and hence the import license.
Okay. Now, Nigeria's crude production improved last month, reaching 1.53 million barrels per day in May 2026. But Nigeria still imports crude and petroleum products. Why has crude production not translated into full energy independence?
Okay, so when you say Nigeria imports, so you're talking about the refineries that import. Okay, so it's good to understand how those things are structured. When Nigeria produces 1.5 million barrels per day, all of that 1.5 billion barrels per day does not belong to Nigeria. So for the purposes of production, there are 2 main contract types. There's what you call the production sharing contract, PSC, and the joint venture. So if you take, for example, a joint venture where Nigeria is the senior partner, usually we have like 51% or sometimes 55% of it. 40% or 45% goes to the IOC, which can be Shell, Chevron, or whatever. So out of the 1.5 million barrels, let's say 40% of it goes to Shell or Chevron or the JV partner. So out of it, you already have like 600,000 barrels that is gone. That doesn't belong to us. So in reality, we have like 750,000 barrels. Out of that 750,000 barrels, there are some loans that was taken in by the previous administration that was based on future sales. In other words, they had already sold the petrol before we produced it. So based on contractual agreements and all that, some part of that has to go to that. Then you have what you call government needs. I mean, they need to pay salaries, they need to run government, and all those kind of things. Some amount goes into that. So by the time you come to what is available for gift and all that, it may not necessarily meet the hungry capacity of the refineries and all that. So definitely they have to look for another way, which is where import comes in.
Okay, so one of the times where we had some analysts on the show, we talked about the number of barrels that we produce per day, and some people were saying, okay, if I think at some point, sometime last year as well, OPEC also came out and said there is a possibility of pushing the barrels to 2 million, and now we are around 1.53, and our quota is still 1.5, and a lot of people are arguing that it is not enough for us. What do you think about this? Do you think that when we look at all of this production, like when we look at Nigeria's crude production reality, what would you say as an expert?
I think even if we can get 3 million barrels per day as quota approved for us, so be it. We can get it. Worst case scenario, we save the money. So, but the thing so much is not about how much we are able to get, as in how well we are able to judiciously use what we have. It is not strange that you will have two families in the same neighborhood, around the same family, earning the same kind of income, and one seems to be doing much better than the other and able to protect their secrets and all that. It comes to judicious usage of resources, which is the part that is actually more important. So yes, should we aim for greater production per day? Of course, why not? Are we able to achieve that? I don't know as at this time, primarily because of the many issues. There's from pipeline vandalization to dilapidated infrastructure to facilities that need servicing to many interests that actually sabotage. So, and then, for a number of the communities, one of the things that can actually help, in fact, should be considered a factor in increasing our production, is to reorientate our people within those communities that are oil producing, that oil becomes everybody's business. And they just don't have to see it as it is government in the central and it is our land. We can do whatever we want. So that way, there's a sense of communal ownership. That sense of communal ownership will enable them to provide security that will keep those things intact. Because during the era of President Jonathan, we were actually producing 2 million barrels per day. Now we can't even produce it. So the infrastructure to produce 2 million barrels per day already exists. We are just not able to utilize it because of a number of these factors that I've mentioned.
Okay, so let's look at these graphics of the Nigeria's energy picture, looking at all these details and figures, quoting them one after the other. Now, we have the crude production of 1.5 million barrels per day for May 2026. We have the OPEC quota for 1.5 million barrels per day, total crude plus condensate of 1.7 million barrels per day. Now, Nigeria is producing more, especially if we look at the data from last month. But production volume is only one part of the energy security. The question is, how much value do you think is captured domestically?
Well, first of all, about close to 90% of our forex comes from petroleum sources. So that's a lot of value, which means that whichever way you look at it, it is the income that comes in from the oil that goes to JP Morgan, that comes into the system, that basically sustains the Naira and a number of the things we do, primarily because of our import dependency. So there's a lot of value that comes from oil and gas from that. Okay. Then when you look at the other parts that it affects the economy in terms of in the last 3 months, in the last 1 year, Shell has done an final investment FID. I think it's about $2 $20 billion, which means that across 5 years, they're going to be pumping $20 billion into the economy. Not too many industries are able to boast that. There's also FID from other investors, other IOCs like that, which means that as those investments start to take place, there will be more jobs, there will be more contractors who are doing those jobs, there will be people offering support services, from even janitorial services will be needed in those places. So yes, it is an infrastructure industry. Infrastructure takes time, whether it's railways, whether it's telecoms, anything that is infrastructure, roads, they take time for you to benefit it. But in terms of impact, in terms of the midterm, in terms of the long term, there's a lot of value.
Okay, now still on the energy picture, the Dangote refinery, the petroleum refinery, represents a major shift because Nigeria historically exported crude and imported finished products. Now we are looking at the refining revolution right now.
Yeah.
Now the refinery has a nameplate capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. But capacity does not automatically mean that we have enough crude supply, that we have full utilization, like you mentioned, stable domestic supply, and zero imports. Now, this is the question. How do you think that we could get to that revolution of refining capacity, that we can be able to fully utilize all of those things that are the issues we are facing in Nigeria's refining?
First of all, I don't know whether the Dangote refinery is operating at maximum capacity yet, because if they are, they're supposed to have gotten a kind of license from the regulator that's a license to come into operation. So I believe they're operating at maybe 70 or 80% of that. So to increase that capacity, there just won't be more refineries. That's all.
More refineries. Now the petrol exports contradiction still on the energy picture. Nigeria exported, I mentioned it earlier, 105.5 billion naira worth of petrol to Togo in Q1 of 2026. But Nigeria also approved the imports licenses for other people who are ready to jump on it. Now, they said this approval is to prevent possible supply disruptions, according to some of the reports. Now, have we seen a temporary transition phase or a structural contradiction?
So I am not sure why import must be a contradiction to export, because that's the nature of the free market. Like I said, it happens everywhere. But more importantly for us, as I've explained, our domestic production in terms of refined petroleum products does not meet our need. Yes, there was something in the papers, I think it was last week, where it was said that the marketers were importing the same fuel that Dangote had sold to some other people. But the reason why they were importing was because it was cheaper for them. At least that's what they said, which means that maybe the prices that they are getting it from Dangote is not as economic as what it would be if they were to buy from the people. So there must be a meeting of minds. So it's not only about the fact that we are producing, it must also be about the fact that what we are producing is produced in such a way that it meets local needs. Because it doesn't make too much sense for us to be selling cheaper outside than inside. Okay. If that were to be true.
If that were to be true. Now, let's talk about infrastructure gaps that we are facing. What infrastructure gaps do you think are limiting the full value addition if we start looking at the full picture?
I think primarily at the midstream level, pipelines are needed across board, and for an average pipeline, $5-6 million per kilometer, and we need thousands of kilometers of it. We need pipelines, we need flow stations, we need processing factories. So we have gas. Everybody says we have gas. So why don't we have enough cooking gas and all that? Primarily because those gas are not being processed. So it's like you can have a house that is beside the river or beside the ocean, but you cannot drink ocean water, it's too salty. For you to drink ocean water, you need to desalinate it to remove the salt. If it is river water, you need to process it for it to be drinkable. So and there's a saying from an old movie that says that water everywhere, but none available to drink. So you can have a lot of water around you, but if you don't have it properly processed for domestic and human consumption, it is no value. So, and that's what that's our situation. The gas that we have needs to be brought out of the ground and needs to be processed for it to be used, for it to add value to us. That particular processing plant, we need a number of it. It's a major downstream infrastructure facility gap that we are missing.
Okay, now while you were speaking earlier, you said everybody said we have gas, enough gas. Now I want us to look at Nigeria's gas export earnings. We exported $2.53 billion in Q1 of 2026, which went up from the $2.24 billion Q4 of 2025. Now, according to the CBN balance of payment data, we have all of these figures there. Why did you say everybody say we have gas? I really want to understand, is there more to that particular statement?
Okay, so we actually have more gas than oil.
Okay.
So technically, if we are to do it in terms of ratio and size, we probably have 10 times as much gas as oil that we have. And there's nothing wrong with that. In the past, it may have been a nuisance, but this is the gas economy, because you need gas to build a lot of plants with a proper gas master plan, which is part of the gas master plan anyway. Okay. You can have a situation where every local government can have a processing plant or a factory. What that means is that somebody can go to school, live in his rural government in Port School and all that, and earn comparably with a manager in Zenith Bank. If that will happen, then you have the situation that you have abroad, where you call even development, okay, where the infrastructure, the facilities, be it internet and all that you have in the villages, and that you have in the cities, will exist in the villages. You will find out that rural-urban shift will stop, because it will just be those who now really want to come to the cities that will come. Because if you can get all the things you are looking for in the city, in the village, what is exciting you to move? So, but to get to that, there must be even development of roads, even development of internet facilities, even development of those things that they need. And gas has been targeted as one of those things that can ensure that kind of even development.
Okay, so can gas actually become Nigeria's next major FX engine beyond crude?
Yes, it can.
How?
And yes, it should.
It should.
Because once we produce more gas, there is no amount of gas that we'll produce at this time that will not get a buyer.
That will not get a buyer.
It's the seller's market at the moment.
It's the seller's market. Okay, now let's look at the conversation with the tensions involving major oil producers like Iran affecting global oil prices. What does this mean for Nigeria as an oil producing country and for ordinary Nigerians who buy petrol? So the only real way those global tension affects us in terms of oil is a commodity, which means it's global, it's fungible, all those characteristics of commodities. So if the oil price goes up, our own price on the balance of probability will go up. And if the oil price goes down, again on the balance of probability, it should go down. Those are the areas which will affect us. And because the crude oil is accounting for 60 to 70% of the cost of the final product, then it should be a big factor. But in terms of the disruption in the supply chain, where, like it happened in India, where they needed to ship crude and they couldn't get crude out, that doesn't really affect us because we are crude producers ourselves. So if for any reasons we are not able to, we have clients or people who have contract with, for which the Strait of Hormuz is a pathway, then there could be issues. But for us, there's nothing in the Strait of Hormuz that is a pathway for our own operations. Okay, so now can increased local refining protect Nigerians from international oil shocks if we, like you said, push for more refinery, or maybe we are able to utilize the refinery that we have at the moment?
Yeah, it can if what is responsible for the shocks is refining capacity. There are many things that come in. So, like I said, our own supply chain does not even go through the Strait of Hormuz. It's not like the people we're selling to, they need to pass through that strait. Most of the people we sell to are in Europe, they're in the Far East. There's nothing that goes through that. So it's it's a question of where the refinery will produce protect us is where we need finished product, and those finished products are coming from the products that are from the Strait of Hormuz. That's when it becomes an issue.
So when we have situations like what happened with the US and Iran tension, does Nigeria actually benefit enough as a producer?
Oh, yes, we benefit.
How?
We benefit from increase in prices. So there is more income from increase in prices. Whether that income translates to a difference for the people at the bottom of the pyramid on the ground is a different thing. That's an economic issue. But we benefit in terms of there's more income to us.
Okay. Now, are there any other thing that you want to add to the belt that we talked about when we look at the full picture of Nigeria's energy picture, and we look at the oil, we look at the gas? Do you have any more comments that you would want to note or for us to actually look at as regards to that conversation?
See, I think for us in Nigeria, we should focus on things being done right. It will help. We used to have a group of friends who were running an NGO for a while, for a couple of years, almost 10 years, and it was not registered properly. It was registered as a business name, and they couldn't really be bothered and all that. Then somebody came. I mean, there came a time they needed to get grants, and they were getting some, and then somebody, for ulterior motive, went to register the NGO name properly and told them that they were infringing on his own rights, even though they had been operating. But because by law, he owned the right. So that was why. So the thing is that when we don't do things properly, that's just an example, it ultimately comes back to hurt us. So we should get used to doing things properly, even if it looks like the long cut. So it will help us in a lot of ways. It will help us in our documentation. It will help us in our expectation. It will help us in our orientation. And it will stop short-term thinking for simple issues.
Short-term thinking for simple issues. Thank you so much for being on the show this morning. It's great to have you here. So we hope to have you one more time so that we could look deeper into details of what it entails to be in the oil and gas sector. Thank you so much.
No problem. Pleasure.
Thank you too for joining the conversation on the other end. My name is Divine Alex, and this has been The Business Lens on Rapid Television. Bye for now.
Like do piping, do the pipes to major hubs in Nigeria for two things. Number one, for generating power. Gas is a good way of generating power. All these deficiencies we're having in power and hydro generation, we can fill the gap, okay, with gas. So one of the infrastructural gaps is that we don't have enough gas pipe moving around the country itself. Let's even live outside. Let's satisfy ourselves first. Number two, is domestic. We have, if we cannot go into individual houses, we can start from clusters, hotels, apartments, places that we know that they can actually afford to do these things, but they can't do it if you don't even run major pipes to that area. For example, there are telecom agencies now that offer different types of products. But when you ask some of them, they'll say, oh, we have not gotten to your area first. So even before you can draw, let's say, from the major pipeline or from the major cable for the telecom, for example, into individual houses, that major cable has to get to your place. And this is the work of the government. So the government has to start looking both inward and outward at the same time, because they can actually multitask. So while we are doing the big rail to go outside and cross whatever to other countries, let's also look at inside. The level to which we can supply gas per day would determine how much we earn from gas. And for now, I'll say it again, it is very small.
It is very small. Thank you so much, Economist Abiola, for that contribution. And thank you so much, Daniel Efa, for being on the show this morning with us. Now, Nigeria's economy is entering a new phase where capacity regulation and investor confidence will determine the next chapter. My name is Divine Alex. Stick around again for another episode of the Business Lens on Thursday at 11 a.m. For now, bye for now.